distorting reality. You're making it sound like Lebanon invaded Israel. No, Israel is inside of Lebanon right now. Do you condemn Israel for being inside of Lebanon?
By Hezbollah,
do you condemn them for taking 70% of Gaza?
Imagine if America was taking missiles daily from Tijuana, Mexico. Tijuana would be
well, you're making the argument for Hezbollah.
If that happened.
You're making the, I can't believe you're making a pro-Hezbollah argument, because what Hezbollah is saying is, can you imagine if America was invaded and they took half of Texas, as they're doing right now? Israel invaded Lebanon and has taken southern Lebanon. Well, of course we would fight back.
Welcome back to Reactionary Politics, the channel where we cut through the mainstream media spin and get straight to the facts. Today, we are looking at an absolute masterclass in calling out foreign policy hypocrisy. Cenk Uygur went on Piers Morgan Uncensored and completely dismantled the double standard regarding nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Before we seamlessly dive into this clip, do me a massive favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts as we watch. It really helps push the video out in the algorithm so we can keep bringing you the truth. Let's roll the tape.
The point is that.
But I really don't. Sorry, just to labor that point. Hang on one second. Let's let it go. I really do not understand why it is, and I've raised this point many times on this show. I do not understand why Israel, which demands full transparency from countries like Iran, right down to exactly how much enriched uranium they've got, why it's generally agreed that they have a huge number of nuclear weapons themselves, but they get a pass. They're the only country in the world that doesn't have to even admit they've got nuclear weapons. And, you know, to General Kimmer's point, if Saudi Arabia did want one, or Qatar wanted one, or the UAE wanted one, I'm at a bit of a loss to understand why, if Israel's allowed to have a lot of them, why they shouldn't be allowed to.
Stop right there. Did you catch what's happening here? This is the classic textbook deflection we see every time this topic is brought up. A very basic fundamental question. Why is Israel the only country in the world that doesn't even have to admit they have a nuclear arsenal, let alone face inspections, while demanding total transparency from their neighbors? If the logic of nuclear deterrence is that it prevents you from being attacked, which is exactly what the United States, Russia, and every other nuclear power argues, why does that logic suddenly evaporate when applied to anyone else in the region? Let's keep watching.
It's really simple. The General Kimmett mentioned it. They've been invaded by all of their neighbors in recent history. The missile force that they have, the bombs that they have, roughly 30 or 40, are a deterrent against a second Holocaust. The big difference between them and the state of Iran is not a typical Westphalian state. They are like a death cult. They believe, they have a millenarian belief that if they cause enough chaos, they can usher in the arrival of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. And so when you have a group of people who actually want to use a nuclear weapon, then they're hard to deter because it's part of their eschatology. They are not a normal nation.
Wow. Death cult. Millenarian beliefs. Notice how when the geopolitical argument falls apart, they immediately pivot to fear-mongering and religious essentialism. Cenk is entirely right to push back on this framing. If you look at the actual geopolitical reality of the last 40 years, which country has been expanding its borders? Which country has nuclear weapons aimed outward as a deterrent? Israel has had nuclear capabilities for decades. You cannot surround a country with hostile forces, arm one side to the teeth with untouchable nuclear capabilities, and then act shocked when the surrounding nations feel they need a deterrent of their own to survive. It's completely inconsistent logic.
But given, but Lieutenant Colonel, given
wait.
Hang on, Cenk, hang on. Still my show, I think. Hang on, still my show. It's called Cenk Uygur Uncensored, and by the way, we should maybe have that conversation. But until it is, I conduct the thing here. Lieutenant Colonel, this is fine, but again, if you take the principle that if you come under attack, you should be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Well, what about the Gulf states? They've all come under attack from Iran. The Americans believe that Iran is literally weeks away from developing nuclear weapons. That threat doesn't seem to have been diminished at all by any of this warmongering in the last 16 weeks from what I can see. So if you take that argument, if you extrapolate that out, if you're Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, whatever, given you've come under attack from your neighbor, Iran, why should you not be allowed to have the same nuclear deterrent that Israel has?
So here's the challenge, right? Israel has had nuclear weapons for probably 40 plus years. The Middle East, minus Iran, has shockingly been without nuclear weapons. So if the UAE, if Saudi Arabia, if Turkey were to suddenly want a nuclear weapon, now why is that? What's the proximate trigger? It certainly wasn't Israel having nuclear weapons. No, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran having nuclear weapons that is the trigger.
Right.
And it is longstanding U.S. policy to be opposed to nuclear proliferation. It makes things progressively more difficult.
Except Israel.
The more nations that are armed with nuclear weapons.
The United States actively sought to stop Israel having more nuclear weapons in the last 20, 30 years? Or has it just allowed it to?
I'm aware of no policy one way or the other with regards to the U.S. and Israel. There may be some classified negotiations, but shockingly, prior to this conversation with Cenk, you don't really hear a lot of concern about Israel's nuclear weapons program because they haven't used it. Nor do they threaten their neighbors with it constantly.
They've used it to attack all their neighbors. They use the threat of it, and they say, well, you can't attack us back because we have nuclear weapons. And the one country that has nuclear weapons in the Middle East has launched wars against almost all of its neighbors. So they've got that as backup. They've got Iron Dome as backup, and it has emboldened them to take land in Gaza, to take land in Lebanon, which you guys are denying. Iran has taken no land. Israel has...
Exactly. Cenk is hitting the nail on the head. We have to look at the timeline objectively. The opposing guest is trying to argue that Iran getting a weapon is the trigger for a regional arms race. But as Cenk rightly points out, the arms race already started decades ago. If your neighbors are constantly getting invaded and one state holds the ultimate trump card and refuses to sign the non-proliferation treaty, the geopolitical reaction is predictable. Cenk is applying objective realism here, while the other guest is relying on American exceptionalism and selective morality. But watch what happens next because Cenk brings up Lebanon and the other guest completely loses the plot.
Has taken land over and over again. Do you know that in 1948, only 6% of the land was Jewish? Now it's 78% is owned by Israel. How did the settler colony get from 6% to 78%?
This is my turn to begin to talk
through
over
a campaign
Cenk.
of ethnic cleansing and genocide.
I was in southern Lebanon in 1986 with the IDF. Land that the IDF voluntarily left. Why were they there?
Sense.
They went up to try to kick out the PLO. You know who rescued the PLO? President Reagan and the Americans rescued the Palestine Liberation Organization. Israel left Lebanon. They left Gaza. So they were attempting to trade land for peace.
And then they came back in.
Unfortunately,
and they came back in. Didn't they come back in 3 times?
And got into southern Lebanon.
They keep wanting to take Lebanon, and you just told us you're with the IDF.
The United Nations was supposed to prevent Hezbollah from getting to be a murderous force, and they utterly failed. In fact, Hezbollah built
You make it sound like Lebanon invaded Israel.
Outposts.
Israel invaded Lebanon.
And there is the absolute knockout blow. The guest tries to pull the Hezbollah is invading Israel card, and Cenk immediately grounds the conversation back in historical and present reality. Israel invaded Lebanon. You cannot claim self-defense while you are literally occupying or invading another sovereign nation's territory. Cenk bringing up the history of the IDF voluntarily entering southern Lebanon in 1982 and the drastic shift in land ownership since 1948 completely shatters the narrative the other guest is trying to build. The other guy says, well, what about Hezbollah firing missiles? Cenk's response is the only logical one. If someone took half of Texas, would America fight back? Of course we would. You can't violently displace people, occupy their land, and then act like the victim when they fight back.
Hurting reality. You're making it sound like Lebanon invaded Israel. No, Israel is inside of Lebanon right now. Do you condemn Israel for being inside of Lebanon?
By Hezbollah,
do you condemn them for taking 70% of Gaza?
Imagine if America was taking missiles daily from Tijuana, Mexico. Tijuana would be
well, you're making the argument for Hezbollah.
If that happened.
You're making I can't believe you're making a pro-Hezbollah argument, because what Hezbollah is saying is, can you imagine if America was invaded and they took half of Texas, as they're doing right now, Israel invaded Lebanon and has taken southern Lebanon, well, of course we would fight back. You're saying, and I agree, and that's what Hezbollah is saying. Well, of course we're going to fight back. They're in our land. They're literally stealing our homes. What do you want us to do? Go, I surrender to the mighty Israelis.
Hezbollah
the Israelis
is a cat's paw for
By the way,
Iran.
you guys call
Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy that Iran has spent billions of dollars training and equipping.
So what? So what? You make it sound like our priorities are Israel's priorities.
Hezbollah and the Iranians
is defending Lebanon against Israel. So what?
Hundreds of U.S.
We're not
Marine
responsible
Corps,
for Israel. Israel is not our daddy. Israel might be your daddy, but Israel's not our daddy.
Iran.
Look, whether you agree with everything Cenk Uygur says or not, in this specific debate, he was the only one applying a consistent moral and geopolitical standard. You can't have one set of rules for the West and its allies, and a completely different set of rules for everyone else, and expect peace. It just doesn't work. That's all the time we have for today on Pundit Patrol, Reactionary Politics. If you agree with Cenk here, or if you think I missed something, let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. See you in the next one.